السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. قال الله تعالى في شان حبيبي: إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه الصلاة والسلام عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. Last week we were kind of continuing with talking about Karbala and Imam Hussein al-Islam, and I mentioned that the companions couldn't even fathom that someone could do this to the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is why they were not there. And I mentioned the story of Farazdaq, as Imam Hussein al-Islam is leaving. And so someone asked me later on that how come Farazdaq could understand this and yet the other people could not. And so I didn't go into detail as to who Farazdaq is. And so to understand how he could know this, you have to understand his background. If you look in Arab society, two major poets, Farazdaq and Jarir. Most scholars say that Farazdaq was the better poet. Poetry at that time, of course, is the median or the media, period. In fact, Jarir destroyed the reputation of a whole tribe for years, for generations, simply with one poem. Somebody said in front of him that Farazdaq was better. He put out a poem ridiculing that tribe, and the whole tribe couldn't show their face anymore. In fact, there were people who would not even acknowledge that they were from that tribe anymore. This is how powerful the poetry was. Like these days, you put out something on TikTok, 2 minutes, and especially if you're lying, then it spreads like a viral. It is a virus. Poetry then in Arab society was even more powerful than that. So the history of Farazdaq quickly is that when he was a young boy, his father was in the army of Ali radiallahu anhu. And so after the Battle of the Camel, his father brought Farazdaq to Ali radiallahu anhu because he was a very good poet, even at a young age, and he said, use him. Ali radiallahu anhu said, I don't have any need for him. When you're standing for the truth, you don't need propaganda. He says, I don't have any need for him. But he told Farazdaq, he said, go and memorize the Quran. So he tried, but he never completed. Poets, like everybody else, have to make a living. And poets, generally in those days, became, and you look like in where you have kingships, the kings always had poets of the court, to spread their propaganda. So no different even then, and no different than today. It's just the form of media is different. Now they own, the news channels, they own, who's running all of these platforms, and so they pay them and they get them to say whatever they want. Farazdaq ended up becoming the poet of the court for Banu Umayyah. And because of this, he knew what was going on inside. The companions, those that were in Medina Munawwara, those that were in Makkah Mukarramah, they were isolated, or insulated rather, from all of the things that were going on in Sham. which was the headquarters for Banu Umayyah. So this is why when Farazdak makes this statement to Abdullah ibn Amr radiallahu anhu, when Abdullah ibn Amr radiallahu anhu says that, why don't you go with him, you want to be with him. He says, I am afraid of what they will do to him. And Abdullah ibn Amr radiallahu anhu, he says that, how can anyone do anything to him? This is the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is why Farazdak understood that what Banu Umayyah is capable of, and yet Abdullah ibn Amr rather did not. Because there's that tendency, when you're good, you consider everybody good. Just like, and the opposite as well. A liar thinks everybody's lying to him. Just like a thief thinks everybody is stealing. People that are decent, they look upon everybody as being decent. So Imam Hussein al-Islam, however, understood the situation. And this is why he left Medina. This is why he left Makkah. And we'll come back to this, and this is what I want to cover today. Today is the 15th of Safar. So the women of the household of Rasulullah, the wives of Imam Hussein al-Islam, his nieces, his sisters, the granddaughters of Rasulullah, they are still imprisoned in Sham, along with Imam Zain al-Abidin. On the 15th, they're still in jail. There'll be another few days before they're brought into the palace, and then eventually, somewhere in Rabi al-Awwal, they will be sent back to Medina Munawwara. The news of the martyrdom of Imam Hussein al-Islam reached Makkah and Medina instantaneously. And this is in hadith. This isn't from the books of Sirah. This is a hadith. And also those hadiths which even Nasruddin Albani says are sahih. This is related to those what we talked about before, where Jibreel al-Islam comes with the angel of rain and meets with Rasulullah sallallahu and tells them, as Imam Hussein al-Islam comes in, that people from your ummah will murder him alongside of the Euphrates. And if you want, I can bring you some of the sand or the dirt from that. And he says yes. And he takes it, and Rasulullah sallallahu smells it, but then he hands it over to his wife Salma, who is the oldest wife at that time. And he says to her to keep this. But he also tells her that when it turns to blood, you will know that they have killed my son, my grandson. So as Imam Hussein al-Islam is being martyred in Karbala, she is in Medina Munawwara. And in this state, where she's half asleep, she sees Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Dust on his clothes, hair out of place, very unusual for him. And she asked him, Ya Rasulullah, why do I see you like this? And he says that I'm coming from Karbala and they have killed my son. And when she wakes up, she looks at that bottle that she put the dirt in, and it's blood. In Makkah, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, who is Tarjuman al-Quran, he is the cousin of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He sees something similar. Of course, he doesn't have anything. He doesn't have the dirt, but Rasulullah says that I'm coming from there, and they have killed my son and those with him. So when this happens, there are companions who immediately leave for Karbala to go and investigate what happened. They arrive. They see that the neighboring people from the neighboring town have already buried the bodies because the heads are over in Sham. And the hadith is in Bukhari that when the head is brought in front of Ibn Ziyad in Kufa before they're sent to Sham, it's brought on this platter. The head of Imam Hussein Islam is brought on a platter. And Ibn Ziyad, the governor of Yazid, is taking a stick and hitting his lips with it. And Anas bin Malik radiallahu anhu, he says to him, he says that, how can you do this? Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that Hassan and Hussein are my flowers. And I used to see Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam kiss these lips. And Ibn Ziyad says to him that if you were not an old man, I would kill you as well. When the news spreads, throughout the Muslim world as to what has happened, people start talking, and now there's this kind of momentum against Yazid. Leaders, kings, tyrants, they always have to put one face in front, as they're doing whatever they are behind the scenes. And so now when word starts spreading, and even in Damascus the word is spreading, and people's attitudes are changing, there has to be damage control. So this is what they start doing. So he starts inviting people, basically delegations of people that are considered respectful in their various areas, and paying them, giving them exorbitant gifts. Of course, when the king is giving you a gift, it doesn't matter because it's not his money anyway. Just like here, when they're spending tax money, it's not their money. They don't care. So the same thing, Yazid is giving these exorbitant gifts, hush money basically. Still accept me as your ruler. From Medina Munawwara, a delegation is invited. And the head of the delegation is Abdullah ibn Hanzala, who is the son of Hanzala, radiallahu anhu. He's well respected in Medina Munawwara. He has many sons, and so he goes. And when he arrives, he's given a gift of 100,000 dirham. Again, keep in mind, 3 dirham at that time bought a cow. The silver coins. 100,000 dirham. Each one of his sons receives 10,000. Other members of the delegation received exorbitant gifts as well. He stays there for a while. He comes back. When he comes back to Medina, the people ask him, they said, what did you see? And this is mentioned, Ibn Kathir mentions this. He says, they asked him, what did you see? And he says that I have seen a man who has no religion. Not a morning goes by that he's not hungover. While Abdullah ibn Hanzala is there, he offered him alcohol. And he says that this is haram in the Sharia of Rasulullah. So he says, well, then just drink it according to the Sharia of Isa as salam. If you remember, he was raised amongst the Christians. His mother is Christian. So his mindset, is that modern-day Christian who of course have nothing to do with Isa as salam. Drink it in the Sharia of Isa as salam. So he says to the people, I've seen a man who has no religion. Not a day goes by that he's not hungover. He womanizes. He spends time with young boys. I shouldn't have to explain what that means. If you look at Arab history, back then there were 5 people that were famous for this. Abu Jahl, Walid bin Mughira, Marwan, his father Hakam, and Yazid. So then they asked Abdullah, they said, what will you do? You've accepted these gifts from him. He says, I will use this to prepare an army to go and fight him. And that's what he does. Of course, in Medina you have, spies everywhere. Word reaches Yazid that, they're preparing, that they have broken their allegiance to you. Because they said, look, you murdered Imam Hussein al-Islam, what is left? Our allegiance to you has no meaning. Your kalma has no meaning. So they're preparing this. Yazid sends word to one of his generals, Muslim bin Uqba. Listen to the names of these people. Muslim bin Uqba. And he places him at the head of an army of 100,000 men to go and basically deal with Medina Munawwara, the people of Medina Munawwara. So they come. The army comes. He instructs them as they're leaving that I make the haram of Medina halal for you for 3 days. Do whatever you want. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made Medina Munawwara haram, a sanctuary. And he says, I make it lawful for you. Do whatever you want. Of course, a lot of people will try to argue, these are just things in the books of history, which they're lying, because in the books of hadith. You read Bukhari, you read Muslim, you find the hadiths that deal with this. They come, and in the hadith, it's mentioned when the army comes, the people come to the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the only wife who's living at that time, Bibi Salama, radiallahu anha, the mother of the believers, and they ask her, they say, is this that army? The army that will come against Imam Mahdi. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us, what about that army? He said that it will be that there will be 80 flags, because that army will also come from Sham. There will be 80 flags, and underneath each flag will be 12,000 troops. So 960 troops, basically a 1,000,000-man army. And she says, no, this is not that army. They ransack the city. They kill, according to most historians, at least 10,000 people. The hadith in Sahih Bukhari, Sayyid bin Musayyib. Sayyid bin Musayyib, radiallahu anhu, is not a companion, he's tabi'i. He is the son-in-law of Abu Huraira, radiallahu anhu. He is one of the 7 fuqaha of Medina Munawwara, amongst the famous fuqaha of Medina Munawwara. He's one of them. He is a narrator of hadith. And his state, he says, and the hadith is in Bukhari, he says that after the first civil war, there were no companions of Badr that were left. And after these days of Harra, these are known as Ayyamul Harra, the days of Harra, the days of oppression. He says, after this, there was no companion of Hudaybiyah left. Because there are people who say, no, see, this was just people in Medina who revolted, and Yazid rightfully sent the army to crush the revolt. And none of the companions broke their allegiance to Yazid, and only a few people were killed, and none of the women were violated. And this is what they say. You read the hadith and the exact opposite. The companions are the ones, the only exception to that is Abdullah ibn Umar. He's the only one who told the people, look, don't do this. Not because he thought Yazid was right, but because he knew what was going to come. Imam Hussein al-Islam could have stayed in Medina, but he knew what would come if he stayed. These days would have happened even before. This army ransacks the city. Again, you read the hadith in Muslim and Bukhari, and the hadith with the whole section in Muslim dealing with those who scared the people of Medina. where Rasulullah says Allah's curse and the curse of the angels and the curse of all those who curse is on the one who scares the people of Medina. And even in the hadith, he doesn't specify whether those people of Medina are Sahabi or not. He simply says scares the people of Medina, much less kills the people of Medina. So now, for 3 days the adhan is not given because the masjid is used as a stable to park the horses and all of the filth with it. And it's interesting, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't even give the people that are involved in this even the chance to make tawbah. In the middle or at the end of those 3 days, Muslim bin Uqba, the general of the army, he dies. Even Ibn Kathir, who is from Banu Umayyah, if you look at his lineage, he goes back to Banu Umayyah. He has defended Banu Umayyah in many things, but even here he has to acknowledge that they did this. The only thing is, he says that instead of saying 10,000 people were killed, 2,000 people were killed. But still, you have the killing of the people of Medina. This is when Abdullah ibn Zubair radiallahu anhu, who himself is Sahabi. His father is Sahabi, his father is Ashim al-Bashara, Zubair bin Awam. His grandfather is Sahabi, Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu, and Ashim al-Bashara, and the first Khalifa, and the friend of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His great-grandfather, Abu Qahafa, is Sahabi. He is in Mecca, and when this happens in Medina, he also breaks his allegiance to Yazid and declares Khilafah, and all of the people of Hijaz acknowledge him and fall behind him. So now Yazid sends word to this army to go and attack Mecca. The general's dead, so he sends word to Ibn Ziyad that I want you to become the general of this army, lead this army and attack Mecca. Ibn Ziyad writes a letter back. He says, I killed he says, I killed Imam Hussein al-Islam on your orders. For those who said, Yazid didn't order. He says, I killed Imam Hussein al-Islam on your orders. I'm not going to do this. Eventually, one of the men in the army become the general, and they come and they lay siege to Mecca. And this is when they catapult fire into Mecca. The Kaaba, the roof of the Kaaba is burnt because, if you remember, it was made of wood then. The horns of the ram that Ibrahim al-Islam sacrificed in place of Ismail al-Islam were still kept at that time in the Kaaba. They are burnt. 3 of the walls of the Kaaba fall. In the middle of this siege, again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not even allow them to make tawbah. In the middle of this siege, Yazid dies. And if you read what he died from, they tell you kalanj, which is some abdominal pain. If you look at it medically, what it actually is, he died from the effects of cirrhosis. Now, he killed his liver drinking so much. He wasn't even 38. This is where Rasulullah said that the young boys from Banu Umayyah will make my member a toy. They will make it a plaything. Now, one point here, there's this atheist, and everybody's got a YouTube channel. There's this atheist with the YouTube channel, and so he talks about the year of the elephant, Surah Fil in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about when Abraha was coming to destroy the Kaaba. And of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protects the Kaaba. And he takes the statement of the grandfather of Rasulullah, Abdul Muttalib, where when Abraha's army comes, and Hazrat Abdul Muttalib, eventually he comes, to make a long story short, he goes to the Kaaba, he holds the kiswa or the cloth of the Kaaba, and he says, oh Allah, even a camel protects his child, so this is your house, so you protect it. And then he leaves. And of course Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends Ababil, the sparrows, and they destroy the army. But if you look later on, Yazid first, desecrates the Kaaba. And the Imam Hussein al-Islam, this is why he left Makkah. And he tells Abdullah ibn Umar and Abdullah ibn Zubair, when he's leaving Makkah, that Rasulullah said that the Kaaba will be desecrated because of a lamb, and I don't want to be that lamb, so I'm leaving. Years later, it will be desecrated again. So this atheist, he says, oh, see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala couldn't protect the Kaaba then, later on. And then, he gets into the story of the elephant, and he tries to show that, oh, this is all made up. No one's statement takes preference to the statement of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not protect the Kaaba because the Kaaba is his house. He did not protect the Kaaba as the Rabb of the Kaaba. If you read the surah, it says what? It says, Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil. It says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala addressing his beloved that, oh my beloved, did you not see what your Lord did to the people of the elephant? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protected the Kaaba not as the Rabbi Kaaba, but as Rabbi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Because if he had allowed Abraha to do what he allowed Yazid to do later on, the people of Makkah would have been taken as slaves. The women would have been taken as concubines. Rasulullah was born 55 days after the event. What would have happened to his mother? What would have happened to him? This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not allow Abraha to do what he wanted to do. He protected the Kaaba as the Rabb of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is also why he allowed this to happen later on. Because when the Ummah fell to such a level that Imam Hussein al-Islam is martyred, what is left? The Kaaba is not even worth the life of one believer, much less the life of the leader of the believers, of the leader of the youth of Jannah, the grandson of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So if people didn't get who Yazid is by seeing what he did with Imam Hussein, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I'm giving you more opportunities to understand who he is. And yet you still have people who defend him. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, with the verse that we've talked about the last few weeks. Verse 113 of Surah Hud, Surah number 11. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ولا تركنوا إلى الذين ظلموا فتمسكم النار. And do not be inclined toward tyranny or toward tyrants, lest you be touched by the fire. So anyone who defends or tries to apologize and explain for any tyranny, the warning from Allah is very clear. And again, as we've said so many times, the love of Ahlul Bayt, the love of the household of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not an option. It's not even sunnah. It is fard. It's an obligation on every believer. This is part of La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. When Imam Ali Rida went to Khurasan, and he narrates the saying of Rasulullah to all of these muhaddithin, scholars of hadith, You know, Imam Bukhari, Imam Muslim, Imam Tirmizi, Nisai, all of them are from Khurasan. Abu Dawud and Ibn Majah are from Iran. So all these muhaddithin gather and they say, narrate a hadith for us. And he narrates that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after he narrates the isnad, that he heard from his father, who heard from his father, who heard from his father, his father, time's up, his father. I'm going to shorten this very quickly until it comes to Sayyidina Ali Karamallah, who heard it from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that La ilaha illallah is my fortress. And whoever enters my fortress is in protection, is under protection, under my protection. And everybody says, Allahu Akbar. And he says, but this has conditions. And I am one of those conditions. The love of Ahlul Bayt is a condition for this. So I'll end here today. We'll continue with other things next week, inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill our hearts with His love, His true love, and the true love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of those whom they love. Those who have not made sunnah, go and make sunnah, inshallah.